Welcome to part 4 of this Blender tutorial series where I'm showing you how to create a product visualization, and we're creating this studio microphone. So this is part 4. If you haven't seen the previous parts, definitely check out the tutorial playlist linked in the video description. So in this part we're going to be creating the arm for the shock mount, and then we're also going to be creating the foam cover. Now before we start this part, I wanted to let you know about my Rusty Fire Hydrant Blender tutorial series. So that's a 4-part tutorial series, and it's all step-by-step and in real time, and I show you how to create this rusty fire hydrant. So we start by modeling the fire hydrant, and then we do lighting and materials, and then I show you how to use this cool texture painting method where you can texture paint on the model and it adds all of this grunge, and you can paint away where you want the metal to be worn away and where you want there to be rust on the fire hydrant. If you'd like to check out the course trailer video, you can find the links in the description, and I'll have the product pages linked in the description. So let's start by modeling the foam cover. So I'll just center the 3D cursor, and I'll go to the add menu, and I'm just going to add a circle, and on the circle settings, make sure it's using 32 vertices. We'll go into edit mode, and I'm just going to scale it way down, and then in object mode, we're just going to bring it up. We'll go to front view, and we'll go back into edit mode, and we're just going to model the basic shape. So let's make it a little bit thicker, and then we'll extrude it down, kind of scale it down a little bit, extrude it down again, and then scale it down even more, and then we can fill the face there. Let's select that loop there, and we can extrude it and then scale it, and extrude again and kind of scale it. And then again, we'll extrude it and scale it down like that. Now here at the very top, instead of just filling it with one big fill, I want to use the grid fill so that the geometry is more even. So I'm going to hit F3 for the search. We're going to search for grid, and I'm going to use the grid fill. And then I might just scale up a little bit bigger. All right, so that's pretty good. So I can now add some loop cuts to make the geometry really even and to smooth it out. So I'll select that loop, add a bevel there with Control B, just scroll my mouse wheel till it's about square shape. So like that, click there, select this, Control B. So I want each one of the faces to be a pretty even size so that they're each going to be about a square shape, because we are going to be using a displacement modifier to kind of displace it to give it more detail. So we want the geometry to be even. Maybe just add a loop cut right here, kind of scale it out a little bit. And then right here, maybe scale it down a little bit. All right, you can also hit O to turn on proportional editing. And I'll just scale the proportional editing and kind of just play around with the shape of it so it looks pretty good like that. Also with the proportional editing on, I'm going to select the very center, and we're going to bring it up on the Z-axis so that it's kind of curving and it's longer. So it just looks a bit more smooth. And then I can bring the entire thing down. And also this here is looking really sharp. So if I just select that loop there, I'll just select that loop, and that loop. And I'll double tap the G key for the edge slide and just kind of slide that down and maybe slide that down. So it's a little bit more smooth. Let's go back to object mode, and we're just going to shade it smooth. Let's now hit Control 2 to add a subdivision surface with 2 levels. And when I go into edit mode, we'll go to the face select. I'll just select this face, and I'll just inset that face just like that, so we don't have any of the stretching there on the subdivision surface. Let's go here to the subdivision surface modifier, and I'm going to be adding a displacement modifier to add a lot of detail on the foam. So on the levels viewport and render, I'm going to turn these both up to 6. So it's going to be very detailed. So let's now add the displacement. So I'll click on add modifier, we'll add displace modifier, and then we'll click on new to add a new texture, and we're going to click on this button to go to the texturing panel. And if I click on the type here, let's change it to clouds instead. Then I can take the size and just drag it way down so it's very detailed. So I'll turn the size of mine down to a 0.0004, so it's really small. And then if we go back here to the modifiers, let's turn the strength to a really small value. So on the strength, I'm going to use a value of 0.002. So now if I zoom in here to the edge, you can kind of see it just has all this tiny little detail. So if it's acting kind of laggy in the viewport, you could turn down the viewport levels. You could turn that down so it's not quite as detailed, but then keep the render at 6 so it renders higher quality. I might just do that. So I'll turn the levels viewport to 5, but then it's actually going to render with 6. But you can see now it looks really detailed. So that's going to be really great for making it look like the detailed foam texture. So we'll select this object, we'll hit F2 to rename it, and I'll just rename it to foam cover, and then we can drag it here into the microphone collection. Let's save the file, and we're now going to model the microphone arm. I'm just going to add a cylinder. I'll go into edit mode, and I'll just scale the cylinder way down, We can also turn off proportional editing, and back in object mode, I'm just going to move this over here. So we'll go back into edit mode, and I'm going to rotate this on the x-axis. We're going to rotate it by 90 degrees, and then I'll kind of bring it over here to the front. Let's add modifier, and we're going to search for the mirror modifier, and we're going to mirror it on the y-axis. Now we'll select the face in the middle and delete the faces, and then if we select everything, we'll push it here into the mirror. We can turn on clipping and then drag it back and then drag it in here so it merges with the mirror. Now let's go to front view, and I'm just going to go to wireframe, and with the vertex select, we're going to deselect everything and just select the bottom here, and we'll delete the vertices. Now if I just box select the bottom pieces, I'll just extrude those down, and we'll bring it down about that far, and we will make the object a bit smaller. Let's just go back to object mode and scale it down so it's a bit smaller. Maybe bring it up here, and then just hit Control A and apply the scale. Let's go back into edit mode, and something that I actually want to do real quick is get rid of the clipping and drag it back out, because I want to have a little space here, because this is going to be basically the hinge. So we're going to select the vertex there, and then shift select these 4 vertices, and we'll fill the faces. And then let's hold down the Alt key and select that entire loop there and fill the faces. Now if we go to the face select and select this face, we'll extrude it into the mirror. We can turn on clipping and then drag it back, and then we'll just delete that face there in the center. So there we go, there's the basic hinge, and we'll actually make it a bit smaller and kind of drag it in just like that. So there's going to be a hinge piece right there. Also, we need to go to the vertex select, and we're going to select these 4 vertices here, and we're going to fill them. We also need to select these 2 or these 4 and fill them, and then also select that entire loop and fill that as well. And then what I want to do is go to front view and go to wireframe. We're just going to box select this bottom part and just drag it down, and that way there's going to be extra space there for the hinge to rotate. Let's now add some modifiers. So I first want to search for the bevel modifier. Let's turn the segments up to like a 3, and then I'll just drag the amount down so it's pretty small. And we'll shade the object smooth. And I'll maybe make the bevel just a little bit smaller. And then also we'll just add a weighted normal to kind of flatten those flat faces. So we're going to use this first piece to make the second piece, so I'll duplicate it and move it up here, and we'll rotate it on the y-axis by 90 degrees. Let's go into edit mode. We're going to select the faces, go to the face select, select all of those faces and delete the faces, select this face and delete the faces. We're now going to select everything, and with the mirror modifier, let's make sure we have the clipping turned on. We're going to push this into the mirror and then drag it back a bit. And then back in object mode, we're just going to drag this down. Let's also scale it down a little bit, and we're just going to bring it down like that and make it a bit thicker so it's just fitting inside the other piece. So this is basically going to be a hinge, which is going to rotate. Now I do also want to delete his bottom half as well. So if we go into edit mode and go to side view, let's go to wireframe. We're just going to delete this half side, so the bottom side, so just delete that. And then if we open up the mirror modifier, we also want to mirror it on the x-axis. And then we want to bring everything up a little bit like that, and then scale everything down a little bit like that and kind of bring it forward. So now it looks a little bit more flat there. And I think everything should be scaled down a little bit more, and then maybe bring everything up in object mode like that, and then bring it out so it's just the correct size. Now if we select this object and hide it, we can go back into edit mode, and we just need to fill the faces here. So we'll just select these 2 vertices and we'll extrude them down into the mirror. And then if we select these 2, we can fill the face there. And then if we select this entire thing, we'll just fill that right there. That's pretty good. Let's select this loop and kind of bring the loop over. If we go back to object mode, we will unhide the other object so we can see it again. And then let's just finish modeling this piece here. So we'll bring it out, and then we'll extrude it, and we'll bring it down on the z-axis so it's a bit smaller like that, so it kind of comes in, and then fill that face there. Now you can see when I fill this, there's an issue here. There's like a triangle hole. So we're going to select this vertex. We're going to extrude it into the center. And then if we select these 4, we can just fill that. That's looking better. So here on the bevel modifier, I want the bevel to also be working right here. So let's open up the bevel. We'll close the mirror and open up the bevel. And we just need to change that angle limit so it's smaller. So it looks like turning it to like a 21 looks pretty good. So that's looking better. Also, let's maybe move this forward and bring it down a little bit so it's a little bit longer. Maybe bring the entire thing forward a little bit as well. So we'll select both of these and we'll bring them forward and we'll bring them up. And this piece is going to connect with the circular piece. So we're just going to bring this over and just stick it right about there. So that's looking pretty good. So now that piece connects. So this piece will rotate, and then this piece could also rotate, and it's going to move the shock mount. So I now want to model kind of a circular piece here for the hinge. So we'll center the 3D cursor. Let's go to the add menu and add a cylinder. We'll scale the cylinder way down. We're just going to put the cylinder right here. We'll rotate the cylinder by 90 degrees. We'll scale it way down, and then in edit mode, we're going to scale it up just on the y-axis, and then scale it down and bring it up here. Maybe scale the entire thing up a bit. We're just gonna make it really small like that, so it's just popping out there. And then we want to copy the modifiers from the other object, so I'll shift select this object last. We'll use Control L and copy the modifiers. Now I don't want the mirror modifier, so if we select this object again, we copy the modifiers, but we can just click on the X here to get rid of the mirror. And then also let's hit Control A and we can apply the scale. So now the bevel is looking correct. And also we might need to hit Shift N to recalculate the normals. So now what I want to do is make kind of a little knob which you can use to tighten this piece. So we're going to add a cube for this. And we'll scale the cube way down. Let's bring the cube over and up. Scale it way down. We're just going to bring it forward there and then just apply the object scale. So we'll go into edit mode. We'll scale it down even more like that and then bring it down. And we want to bring the knob in the very center. So to make sure that this cube is in the very center of the other object, we're going to select the cylinder. And we also want to make sure the cylinder is about in the center. So if we kind of look at where this object is, you can see where the center point is. So let's move these objects over so they're about in the very center. So the rotation point of these hinges is going to be where this object is. So because the origin point is in the center, I'm going to hit Shift S. We'll go to cursor to selected so the cursor is in the center. Now what I want to do is select this object and hit Shift S. And we're going to use the selection to cursor. Actually, the top one here, selection to cursor, let go. And now you can see the cube is in the very center. So if we rotate this on the y-axis, it's rotating in the very center. So I'll go into edit mode and I'll scale it up a little bit. And then what I want to do is add a loop cut here, left click and right click so it stays in the center. We can select this side and we'll just delete the vertices. And then we're just going to add a mirror modifier and we'll turn on the clipping so it mirrors over to the other side. So now I can box select this side and we can extrude it and scale it way down, just like that. Maybe bring this out, and then we'll hit Control B for a bevel, and I can scroll my mouse wheel and just make kind of a little knob there, which we can use to rotate that piece. And maybe scale it down so it's a little bit more thin. And then this object here, we can apply the mirror. So click on the drop down and apply the mirror. Let's also move this out of the way, and we're gonna shift select this object last because we wanna copy the modifiers. So we'll use Control L and we're just going to copy modifiers. So this object has the same modifiers and we'll just shade the object smooth. Now we'll select this object, we'll go back into edit mode and I want to bring it forward. So we'll select the face, we'll select this front face and bring it forward. And now we can just bring this object back and just stick it right there. And then this object, we can just bring the face back. So now we have this little knob here, which we can use to tighten it if we want to. And I thought it would be cool just to rotate it slightly on the y-axis. So it's just a little bit rotated, so it looks more natural. So let's add a cylinder piece, which is going to be right down here. So I can just select this cylinder and duplicate it and we'll move it down. And then I can just rotate it. We'll rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees. And I can just stick it right up here. Let's go to front view and I'll go into edit mode and I'll scale up so it's a bit thicker. And then if we go into wireframe, I can just select the bottom and bring the bottom down so it's a bit longer. Now I also want to model a couple of like little indents, which is going to be similar to kind of what we did here. So let's go back over here. I want to add a loop cut. Let's drag the loop cut down here close to the bottom. And then I'll add a bevel with Control B. We're just going to add one cut there. And then we can extrude it. We can hit escape and then Alt S to scale it in along the object's normals, like that. Now I want to add basically the same thing, which is going to be higher up. So I can just add a loop cut. Let's drag the loop cut down, maybe to about here. Control B to add a bevel. We can hit E to extrude. We'll escape that. And then we'll use Alt S and we'll scale it along the normals and just bring it in like that. So now we have those two little indents there and that's looking pretty good. Now the bevel is a little bit large, so to make the bevel smaller, let's just turn this amount down to maybe a 0.003 instead of 0.005. And I think the entire thing is a little bit too thick, so let's scale it. We'll use Shift Z to make it just be smaller on the X and Y. Now let's also just select any of these loops here and we'll duplicate it and move it up. We'll scale it up. And we can extrude it here inside the other piece. And then if we select this entire piece, it's a little bit too big. So we'll scale that down, just bring it down like that. And then if we just select that loop there, we'll just fill the faces. And then also we need to recalculate the normals as well. So there we go, that's the next piece. So now what we're gonna do is create kind of like a triangle piece here with a little hinge. So to make a triangle, we can center the 3D cursor. We'll go to the add menu and we're going to add a circle, but right behind me on the circle settings, we're going to turn the vertices to 3. So now you can see it's a triangle. So we'll scale this way down, bring it over here. bring it forward. Actually, we'll go into edit mode first and then bring it forward. And that way the origin point is still in the center. And then we'll rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees. And we can fill a face. Let's go back to object mode. And of course, we want to apply the scale because we scaled it down. Let's now add a mirror modifier to it. So we'll add a mirror and we want to mirror it over on the y-axis. So we can kind of bring this in. And then back in object mode, let's kind of bring this down here. And we'll go into edit mode and we're going to rotate this by 90 degrees. I actually want to hit negative, so it's -90 and hit enter. And then back in object mode, I can just kind of bring this up here. Now, all of these corners here, I want to add bevels to them so they're a bit more smooth. So first I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to hit the K for the knife tool. I'm going to click here and then click about in the center and then click about here. Then we can go back and click one more time in the center and then go over to the side, click there, and then hit enter. So this is just going to add some little cuts there so these are broken up into some different faces. So now what I'm going to do is select all of these corners and I'm going to hit Control-Shift-B. Control-Shift-B will add a bevel to just those vertices, and I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel up like that, and we'll maybe do like 6 cuts or 7 cuts so it's pretty smooth, maybe even more. Let's do maybe like 8 cuts. And then just kind of change the size of it, and I'll just click to place that right there. So now we have that shape. So let's add a solidify modifier. So we'll search for solidify, add a solidify, let's drag it in. And then also the solidify thickness needs to be a lot smaller. So I'll make it pretty small. We're just gonna bring it in there and maybe even make it a little bit smaller than that. So a 0.002 looks pretty good. And just put it right there and bring it forward. So we're gonna have a hinge right there and a hinge on each one of the corners there. And let's see, that's going through the other piece. So drag that out so it's not going through the cylinder. All right, that's good. Let's add a bevel. So we'll add a bevel modifier just to smooth out the edges. Let's minimize these so it's a bit smaller so I can see what I'm doing. And I'll turn the segments up to 3. And then I can turn the amount to a pretty small number. All right, just like that. So a pretty small number there on the bevel, and then we will just shade it smooth. And then let's also add a weighted normal, just like we did for the other objects, to flatten that flat face. So now I'm going to make 3 hinges on each side. So we're just going to select this object, we'll duplicate it, move it down, and we'll rotate it by 90 degrees. Let's bring it out here, and I can go into edit mode, and let's go to wireframe. And I just want to delete some of these parts which we don't need. So we'll hit the L key to select that piece, and then we'll box select this piece. And we're just going to delete the vertices. So now we just have that one little bit. Let's drag this over, and I can extrude it out. We'll go back to solid view. And in object mode, I'm just going to drag this over here. Now I normally would want the mirror to be in the center. So what I can actually do is just add a mirror modifier and use this as the mirror object. So we'll choose add modifier. We're going to search for a mirror modifier. Now we can click on these little dots and drag the mirror modifier up so it's at the starting. And then we can use the mirror object. So we'll click here on the eyedropper and choose this cylinder. And then we want to use the y-axis instead. So you can see now we can kind of move this here and it's in the center of the mirror. And there's actually one problem. You can see it's a little bit offset, so that's not going to be quite correct. So instead, what we're going to do is delete this for the mirror object, and we're going to use the triangle pieces instead. And now I can bring this in, and it's perfectly matching with the mirror. So that's great. Let's bring it out, and I will go to the face select. We can just select the center face here, and we can just delete the faces. And then we can just scale this and bring it in here so it connects to the mirror. Let's turn on the clipping button and then just drag that out there so it connects with the mirror. And for some reason, this face is kind of going sideways. So I don't know how that happened, but if we just select the face, we can scale it along the y-axis by 0 to flatten that. And then let's select everything and make it a bit smaller, and then also recalculate the normals. We're just going to bring it in here just like that. Let's go to front view, maybe scale it down a bit smaller, so like that. And then what I want to do is kind of have like a button piece on the top. So if we just drag it back, we can extrude it, and then we'll scale it, make it a bit bigger, and then we can extrude it, and then extrude it, and just start to scale it down to kind of model a basic kind of button top, just like that. So that's looking pretty good. So now I want to duplicate this object and have it be on each one of the corners. So we'll duplicate this, we'll stick it up there, and we'll duplicate this and put it right there. And then we're going to have some arm pieces which are coming off of the triangle. So let's go to the add menu and add a cube. We'll go into edit mode and just scale the cube way down. And then we'll move the cube over here. And we're just going to stick the cube about in the very center of where that circle is. Now to make sure it's in the very center, we can select this object here. And you can see there's actually a problem with this circle, because if I rotate this, you can see it's kind of offset. It's like the axle is kind of offset. So what I'm going to do is select each one of these objects. So these 3 objects. We're now going to click on object. We're going to set the origin. We're going to set the origin to geometry. If we go back to solid view, that's looking correct. So the origin is now in the center of the geometry. So if I just select one of these and rotate them, it's rotating correctly in the center. So we'll select this object. We'll use Shift S and use the cursor to selected. And now we just want to move this cube to the center of where the 3D cursor is. So again, Shift S and selection to cursor. Now that's in the very center. So if we go into edit mode, we'll just scale it down. Let's go to the vertex select. We'll just box select the corner and we'll scale it way out over like that. Make it pretty long. All right. And then if we zoom in here, we'll select the entire thing and you can see it's not in the center. So we'll go back to object mode. We're just going to move it here into the center. Let's go to top view and go to wireframe and just make sure it's right there in the very center like that. And then if we go back into edit mode, let's scale it down on the y-axis just like that. So it's just big enough. All right, that's pretty good. And then also I could maybe scale it up on the z-axis so it's a little bit longer. So now I want to add the same modifiers. So again, we'll add a bevel. We'll turn the segments to 3 and just turn the amount down. And then we'll shade it smooth. And then again, let's add the weight to normal, just like that. And then we want to duplicate this and put it down here. So we'll just duplicate it, move it here. But to make sure it's in the very center of this object so it rotates correctly, we can select this object, Shift S, cursor to selected, select the cube, and then again, Shift S, and this time we're going to use selection to cursor. So now it's in the center there, but now we just need to move it in the center of the hinge. So if we go to top view and go to wireframe, we'll just stick it there right in the very center. Now, if I select these objects and try to rotate it, they're not really rotating correctly. But if I change the transform pivot point to individual origins, now I can rotate these on the y-axis and you can see they're going to rotate correctly. So I actually want to select both of these objects and I'll rotate them up because I want them to be kind of rotated over like that on default. And then I'll change the transform pivot point back to median. So let's just add these objects into their own collection and we'll rename them. So we'll just drag this down here and we can hide the microphone. All right, so hide the microphone, hide the cord, and hide the shock mount. So now we just have the new objects. So let's just first rename all these. So I'll rename that to triangle. We'll rename this to arm mount 2. And then this one over here, this can be arm mount 1. Then this here, this can be called knob. This here can be hinge 1. We'll hide that. And then we can rename this to hinge 2. And this one here can be hinge 3. And the last one here, this can be hinge 4. And this one here, I'm just going to call it cylinder. I'll just rename it to cylinder, or maybe I'll just call it metal cylinder. Then this here, I can call this arm 1. And the last one here, this one, I'll rename to arm 2. So I'll hit Alt H to unhide them all. We'll select them all and we'll use M. We'll go to new collection and we can just call this arm mount. So now they're in their own collection and I'll drag this up here so the backup is at the very bottom. So now we can just unhide everything and see what we've created. So there we go. The modeling is basically all finished. So I'll hit Control S to save and that's going to wrap it up for this part of the tutorial series. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the tutorial series. And if you'd like to help support me and this YouTube channel, you can purchase the finished project files on my Gumroad store and Patreon page linked in the video description. So when the next part is released, it'll be right up there on the YouTube end screen, and you can also find it linked in the video description. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next part.